Yeah, I think, there's a couple things we wanted to talk about on this about Worlds this year. It's getting pretty close. We're under 2 months out now. And we sent out a couple emails in the past couple of days and weeks about it. But yeah, some cool, I think, cool updates coming for Worlds. So, first one, I know you were asking me about it regularly. We finally announced it. Prize money will be back this year. It's a little lower than it was last year, but we kind of built on a conversation you, me, and Giles had back in Atlanta with our approach to prize money for this year that I think the community has, been pretty receptive to. You know, I, Worlds is a really unique, special event. You and I know we've both run it a bunch of times. For the vast majority of us and the people running the race, it's not about prize money at all. That impacts a pretty small proportion of the people that show up at all. Most of us are there to see how far we can go and earn a bib or set a PR or whatever else. So we had a real long think about, where we should spend the money at Worlds. But the more we talked to some athletes, the more we looked around. We looked at, sort of the expanded portfolio with Spartan and Tough Mudder under the same umbrella. And we thought, there is something special that prize money brings to any event. It's a marker that it's a serious competition, that is a championship level event. So we decided to sort of strike a nice balance. It's going to be a $5,000 top prize for each male, female this year, and then trickles down for the top three. I think it's then 2,500 or something like that. So, decent money for the way, where the sport of OCR is right now. We think it's a reason to come out. And, a bunch of our top runners, and this well, come out no matter what. It could be nothing. It could be the biggest prize in the world, but you're still going to see Trevor, and the likes of him out there running it because he comes to run 100 miles every year, not necessarily for the prize purse, but it's a nice benefit.
Yeah, I was asking you a lot because people were asking me a lot. And I told people from the beginning, I said, I think it's going to happen because I think they would have just said no if there wasn't going to be it. It would be very easy to just say no. So I was hoping it would come. I would say, let's hope next year we can do it a little bit sooner. I think if people want to, again, it may not be the only reason they do it, but if you're an elite athlete, it might be a make or break for choosing another event. So let's just try to get it sooner next year. But yes, I'm very happy we have prize money.
Yeah. And, we do have a plan that we've been building out, sort of a strategic plan for all of our world championship level events. So Worlds is 100% that for on the Tough Mudder side. And then there's a string of them in the Spartan portfolio as well. So we've sort of mapped that out for next year already. So by the time we're done with World's Toughest this year, Abu Dhabi, a couple of those events, we're going to have a nice, strong season to lay out well in advance with the prize purses and all that good stuff.
And I think that's good. I think that's definitely something with the merger, and I know you're over both companies with that stuff now. Will be great because Spartan has historically not been great with getting ahead of things, or giving out some information, but not all. So it'll certainly be nice if we can get, and you and I will be in touch, obviously, as we get closer to National Series, Greece, all that stuff. Just getting a nice, as you said, portfolio out there and let people know what's happening in our sport.
Yeah, and it's a real opportunity now, right? Like something that in the days of the arms race between the brands, we were so after each other on so many fronts, whether that was obstacle innovation and trying to stay ahead of each other, or championship events or events for TV, or whatever we were doing, there was always that sort of cat and mouse game we had going for all those years, that I know you were tuned into, and I was on one side of that for a long time. Now that we're under the same umbrella, you can think way more strategically of what adds unique value to customers that may or may not flow between brands and try a bit of both sides, but you don't need to fight on all that stuff. I think the Ultra World Championships is a great example of that. For the past couple of years, we had to cancel last year, unfortunately, with fires. But the Spartan Ultra World Champ format was made to mimic Worlds, and it was out of sync with a normal Spartan Ultra. Correct. And that was just this, a holdover of that, like those competitive days. For next year, we're bringing it back. It's going to be in Morzine, France. It's going to be this beautiful event, and it's going to be a Spartan Ultra. it happens to be the World Championship Spartan Ultra, but it's going to be in the same format as every other Spartan Ultra, rather than trying to compete where we don't need to. You know, Worlds is a great loop-based 24-hour format. Spartan Ultras are great ultra-distance OCR, and they can be those things without us, mixing up and sort of smushing together.
I concur.
Good. If we're agreed, Matt, then hopefully everyone else is happy. But yeah, so that was one of the
your Slack messages are all at Twitter right now.
I just want people to know that I work hard for them. I swear I just turned it off. Bear with me. How unprofessional. Quit.
No worries.
It's off. So we just announced the prize money for Worlds. I think another one that we had teased for a while, but we finally sent photos out of, was the belt buckle at 75 miles.
Right.
Which, I'm quite excited about. That was another one where there was, I think as customers look at the output on there, the amount of conversations and, constructive arguments we had before doing that were profound around where to put it. It's interesting when we look at, from a business perspective, why you look at rolling out any sort of perk like that. It's really to help customers set their goals and where you can help pick people's performances and excite them and, make it just worthwhile. Right. And, there's been debates I've seen. Some people think it's weird to give a belt buckle for under 100 miles. Some people think 75 miles is too much. We should have done it at a lower threshold. But we put a lot of time looking at the numbers over the past 10 years of Worlds to see the performances that people would put up. And we felt like 75 was sort of that perfect balance in there of achievable if you really, really dig deep and you train at it for a bunch of years and you're ready to go. Something to be super proud of if you can earn it. And we wanted to put that out there as an additional perk, and alongside that, I've got one of them right here. I'll leave it up, but they're super cool. They've got some nice text that I think this blur feature is ruining on here, but got some text around the back around how you've run 75 miles, done 100, like hundreds of obstacles over the hours. It's, a cool little way to represent what you can do out there on the course at Worlds. That although it's still a big gaudy belt buckle, is a little bit more usable in the day-to-day than, your bibs that we all love to hang up on our walls, but a nice little shout out to the performances you can put up.
Yeah, I think so. I'm fine. I think 75 is a great distance for it.
And I think you should earn one, Matt.
Not this year, but perhaps when I begin an ultra training block again.
Yeah, deep faith in you. And then a couple of other exciting things coming up for Worlds. We announced the pit open dates for this year. So starting first week of October, we're going to start pit reservations, which is always a hot button sort of set of time there. So it'll be similar to last year. The whole timeline just moved up a week since Worlds is a week earlier this year. But basically, elite contenders get first stab at picking spaces. Like 4 days later, contenders, then anyone that's going to achieve the Holy Grail, and then it opens up to everyone else about a week after it initially opens up. So we're getting the whole pit mat loaded in now, and it'll be the same process. You go in, pick your spot, and makes everything nice and smooth when the day comes. So not that I don't miss the days of like the mad dash or registration to get the best pit spots, but it's a nice way to make it a little less stressful. One would hope.
And for new folks, I want to stress, at the end of the day, it kind of doesn't matter. It's nice to have a closer spot, but if this is your first time, please don't sweat it. You're gonna get to your pit. You're gonna set up your tent. You're gonna get to it between laps. You're gonna find where it is after the first couple times and figure it out, and then it's not gonna be that big of a deal. It's a few extra steps.
Yeah, totally agreed. And I think something I learned in all the years running Worlds, which is if you're really trying to squeeze out every last minute you've got there on course, you bring a pit crew, you may never see your pit at all after you start, other than change a wetsuit or something like that. But that's why we have the quick pit area where you can just grab and go. And it's it's sort of why we redevised the way contender and elite contender and open worked this year. So a little chatter on the Facebook group earlier today and just clarifying from some customers, but I guess as a refresher for the way we changed those categories, you don't need to be a contender or an elite contender anymore to have a chance to podium or win prize money, or anything like that. In years past, they were separate categories completely. So you had to be a contender if you really wanted to win your age group or win the event, anything like that. And that was another one when we looked at it last year. It didn't feel like it incentivized the right type of behavior, really. I remember in 2013, it was the first year I ran Worlds. That's when Atkins just like showed up and ran 100 miles. And no one knew you could do that at Worlds. It felt so far, and to my knowledge, that was his first real OCR event he had run. And I started thinking about experiences like that, and it would have been the biggest bummer if like this dark horse showed up, ran the most miles, and couldn't take the podium. It just was like in the bleachers because he hadn't qualified or done something in advance. So yeah, we decided to sort of break down that barrier. So you can still come as an open athlete, you could win the whole thing if you run it on the day. But if you want some of the cool bragging rights and like light conveniences, it's pretty cool to have a black elite contender bib and get to be in the front of the start chute for sure.
So you're in front of the start chute as an elite contender, which you can go on the Zendesk and learn what it is to qualify to get those things. But there's no middle category. There's just those people and everybody else, right? Because remember, there was elite contender, and open before.
Yeah, so all three of those still exist, and it's basically just a tiered conveniences, I guess. So it's when pit space is open, it'll open for elite contender first, and then contender, and then open. And similarly, when we load in that start chute on the day, first we'll load in elite contenders, then we'll open it up for anyone in a contender bib, and then anyone in an open bib to filter in behind. The only difference between those categories is, that slight difference, getting a little bit of an additional perk there, and they have different bibs, but functionally,
and once upon a time, only the contenders could use what we call the quick pit, which is essentially there's a barrier of, what do you call that, fencing?
Yeah, barricade.
The barricades that line the difference between the start timing chip and the finish timing chip. And so in between those, you're technically in the pit. And so if you don't want to go back to your tent, they can meet you, hand you food and drink, pass clothing back and forth, and you're off. Once upon a time, that was elite only. Now that's everybody. And it's what most people will use. And it's never a problem. Like even with 1,000 racers, nobody's out there at the exact same time, and it seems to work. I do have a question though.
Yes.
I was reading the rule book. Jason Rouleau and I decided to put out some amazing short World's Toughest Mudder prep episodes. He had done them in years past, I think, on his own. And I was like, well, listen, instead of having a podcast feed that goes nowhere, that's hard for people to find, why don't we do it on my channel? So if you're new or experienced, some good listening, some good refreshers. And I read the rules, and it says in the pit area, pit can only hand you stuff. Basically says in the pit and other areas that may be considered okay. And I feel like it should be a binary thing, either in the pit area or not. So do you know what you meant when you worded it that way?
So long ago, and there's so many words in there. I believe that was just meant to encompass that main area when you're running through the chute between the finish line and the start line, or the pit, like the tent area. That's some language I'll clean up so it's less ambiguous.
I would definitely just say don't bring it anywhere on course, because that is a common problem that either people don't read or don't read closely enough, and they just think, oh, well, just here you go, I'm going to see you in a minute anyway, here's my clothes or whatever, and you can't do that out on course.
Yeah 100%, and we'll clean that up. Even the way we've designed the pit this year, outside of that main avenue, when you're going from finish to start, we've physically marked so that the course doesn't run too close to like the side perimeter of the pit, so there's no ambiguity there of like, starting your next lap, but you're close enough that you could hand something over a fence line or something. We've marked that out to just make it a little more clear.
I think that's a wise move.
Yeah. And then what else do we have for you? So the obstacle menu is all set. We were out planning trip. I guess in late July we were there. We went around, toured the whole property, made our selections. And then we've just been finishing the engineering work on a handful of the stuff. But it's a menu I'm pretty excited for. So it's a blend of modified versions of normal obstacles. I think everyone expects that, but stuff we'll regularly have on course, a modified Funky Monkey, a modified Just the Tip, some of that stuff, where we've gotten
definitely bring back Hangin' Tough. Everyone loved that one last year.
Yeah. Well, it'll be there. It'll be a different set of modifications than it was last year, but it'll be there. I think the name of the game this year with penalties is reintroducing some of the, I want to phrase this carefully. I know some of the penalties last year were quite challenging, but we're trying to make sure that we're fairly rewarding obstacle completion. This is a hot topic, I think, always for Tough Mudder and Spartan when we look at the competitive events, right? Which is, how do you keep someone from just effectively taking the penalty? You always have to attempt the obstacle, but even then, how close are you to find that? So really for both brands next year and World's Toughest, at the top of that list, we want to make it so that if there's a really hard obstacle, you should be rewarded for putting in all the energy there to get across it, which means a really hard penalty if you fail it. Which, you probably remember back in the day. I certainly remember back in the day running Lake Las Vegas, and it was like, I think one year Funky Monkey was like a mile-long penalty. It was
there was
egregious. That was imbalanced in my. We went a little too far with some of those penalties back then. But at the same time, if you were able to hang in there, get across Funky Monkey, you gained yourself like a 30-minute advantage, which is also pretty huge.
Yeah,
so
there were barbed wire crawls, there were like cement carries, there were some good penalties.
Yeah, so I think we'll have a nice balance this year. In my estimation, Dingleberries last year, the penalty probably wasn't as hard as we wanted it to be.
It was like that was the scooping one, right? Was that the scooping one?
Yeah, that was filling up a cup. But for as difficult as getting across that cargo net was, probably wasn't. When I was seeing our top athletes taking the penalty on that rather than going across it was a decent indicator that maybe we hadn't balanced it out quite right. So yeah, we'll be looking to optimize that for this year. And then we've got a couple of real throwback obstacles that I'm excited about. Things we did at Worlds in 16, maybe like 15, 16, maybe 17. Some of the years blur together, but some of the stuff we did out at Lake Las Vegas that were really well received that we haven't seen on a course in a while. So at least two of those that'll be quite fun to bring back. A lot of people running Worlds now that never experienced them, and a lot of people who have been running it every year that'll be stoked to see them, I think. So yeah, we've got a pretty solid menu, I think, this year. And then of course Coach will be back. We've re-engineered his obstacle this year, so it's a bit of a better, it's good. It's a better obstacle. It would stand alone as an obstacle were he not there DJing all night, but it's that much better for having him up there doing his crazy stuff with lights and lasers all evening.
How did the monitoring of obstacles and the band system go this year with the experiment in season before we get to Worlds?
So for like monitoring people completing obstacles, taking penalties.
Well, you said that was the whole reason, was that we changed it, was that it would be in one place. It would be at the race center.
Yeah. So for Worlds, it'll still be on course. Now for Infinity, I think it worked really, really well, right? It's easier for one person or a couple of people there to watch people doing their penalties, to explain what they are, to make sure they're, being administered the right way. Infinity in particular, you've got thousands of other people out on the course. That's a lot for one or two volunteers to manage, to see if someone failed it, to send them over to do a penalty, to watch them do the penalty, especially if you end up at a really tough obstacle like a funky monkey, and now you're trying to watch 40 people at the same time plus keep an eye on the obstacle. It's a lot to do. So that worked exceptionally well, I think. So, for toughest and world's toughest, we left them on course because way less people on course at a time. It lets us, you immediately hit someone with a penalty. It lets the flow, it flow a little bit better. And there is something when you're at the higher tier championship events about just knowing when someone crosses the finish line that they're done. That lap's over, especially late in the race when you've people, duking it out for the last little bit of mileage. I would hate for someone to cross the line at Worlds in first, but need to go do some penalties, and they're standing over in a penalty zone doing them. And you don't get that exciting sort of tape finish moment.
It's kind of why Spartan stopped doing that.
Yeah. So, but great for like the kind of feeder events, that initial toe in, I think, to where we have to do things at big volume, and then you get towards the top and we can watch a little bit more closely. So
without giving away numbers, should people expect multiple water submersions?
Oh, when do people not expect that?
I'm just going over some questions that I thought you could answer. Should people expect plus or minus 1.5 electric obstacles?
At Worlds, there will not be any electric. Oh, wait. No, there will be one electric obstacle. I take that back.
I mean, that's a big deal to say none.
Yeah, there'll be one. Electricity at Worlds is a really interesting one. For a bunch of years, we didn't have it at all. And then we had it in the capacity of, a skill bit, you could avoid it. You weren't just running through a field of wires. Of course, in Laughlin, we had Electric Avenue, which was an optional bypass, but not on the main course. So there have been a few different ways that we've sort of roped it in. There was electric that could be turned on and off at Coach's Corner last year. So we've played with it in a few areas. Now, personally,
Operation was a favorite for a few years.
Yes, it was. Yes. So you can expect something, to that degree where you could avoid it.
Okay.
But it will be there. Yeah, that's what I'll say about that.
Okay. All right. Well, and then, what else could I ask you? Will there be a over more than plus or minus 1.5 monolithic over 25 feet tall obstacles?
Not more than one.
Not more than one.
Not more than one.
Okay.
Yeah. We've done some fun stuff with the technical obstacles. We've taken a couple of new features and just spiced them up a little bit for Worlds so that they're more challenging, a little bit more daunting. And this year's Worlds is a nice step back in the direction. I know we've talked about the shift for Tough Mudder overall next year, going to 10 plus miles for all of the events. So just like a harder approach to courses and obstacles for next year, and Worlds this year is, sort of a natural progression. In that direction. So
but Worlds is 5 miles, correct?
5 miles. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And Infinity next year will be 10 miles or 10K?
No. So next year, well, we're either going to unveil this now or we just unveiled it and I forgot. I just wrote the FAQ for it. It'll be 10 miles next year.
Infinity will be 10 miles next year.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's harder than Worlds then. You got to pack some food.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting change in strategy for sure. So obviously the achievements will adapt accordingly. But what I really expect to see next year is you're going to have people competing much more on how quickly they finish their last lap rather than having like a wide range in number of laps, right? It's not fully binary, but I think when we ran the numbers, we expect, a fair number of people from this year would do 50 miles in next year's sort of convention at the top end. I don't know if 60 is possible. That'll be a really fun barrier to watch. But yeah, I think anything from 20 to 50 miles will be the standard next year. So it'll be interesting.
Toughest and Infinity will be 10 miles.
No, so toughest, I'm still looking at some of the results there. Most likely, it'll be 5 miles for toughest rather than a full 10-mile course, but we still have some crunching to do on that front and make sure we can get it set up the right way. But
right, because Infinity is 8 hours during the day. You're going to keep the course as it is. For a night, you can do some moving around.
Yeah, 100%. And that's, when we launched Toughest in 2017, that's what it was. We marked out a slightly shorter course for the overnight, and we would cherry pick the obstacles that went on it. So it'll be something to that effect, I would assume. So the last one, and it's sitting here on my desk, but I won't show everyone yet. I'll wait till we have a proper photograph of it. But we're doing an exclusive limited run piece of memorabilia for Worlds this year. So we're only going to make about 200 of them. What can I say about it?
What can you say about it?
It involves a skull.
Okay.
It's hand painted. It's quite heavy.
Okay.
It is. There's both a beautiful form and a function to it. Yeah, it'll be quite good. I like it. I got the sample just the other day in the mail. So we're getting ready. We will send out pre-order links, I think, in the next 2 weeks, maybe. So we expect those to sell out in pre-order, and then you'll pick them up at the brunch. But they're badass. They're cool. We think everyone will really like them. We developed it with one of the members of the community who had reached out to us.
So why is it so limited?
Because it's cool and stuff is limited. Yeah, it's a higher end piece.
So it won't be accomplishment based.
That's correct. Yeah, this is for purchase. But quite a cool thing to have to stick on your shelf with all the other world stuff, I think.
Okay.
So exciting, I know.
And that was it? That was all the items on our list of
I think so. Do you have any hard-hitting journalistic questions?
I mean, we covered a lot of stuff. Should I assume puzzle pieces will drop a couple weeks before the race happens?
Yeah. Yes. So puzzle pieces, probably start dropping those around the time that pit spaces open up. So early October, we'll start hiding some puzzle pieces. Less sexy than puzzle pieces, but important. We will be doing, ice pre-orders. We've done tables and chair rentals, things like that. So keep an eye out for those links as well when the pit spaces start to open up October 5th.
Why would I want to pre-order ice?
For the convenience, of course. A lot of folks will, come in with coolers and things, but they'll pre-order from our ice supply so they can just grab it once they're on site rather than hauling it around.
I mean, I can see the convenience of a tent.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want to buy a tent. I don't want to fucking deal with it. Like, I'm gonna you guys do that. But a bag of ice is $1 at the gas station on the way to the event. And you're already there, and you're not going to need it because by the middle of the night, everything will be cold anyway.
Well, of course. So anything like last year, I don't know. We get asked for it, and I'm happy. I'm here to make people happy.
Do you have pre-ordered tents?
Yeah, so we're looking to get everything squared away so we can do the pre-ordered tents and tables again this year.
Okay. What do you call the area that you now have in the pit with the microwaves and the soups? What do you call that?
Hospitality.
So again, something Jason and I were talking about. Once upon a time, you guys just had a big tent with a bunch of microwaves in it, in New Jersey, I think, or maybe Vegas the first year. And by the time it got dark, they weren't working, or forget it. But then you guys, okay, let's invest. So by last year, it's a full service thing, full service. You got a person in there you've got coffee, you've got cup of noodles, you've got a food sponsor or a bar of some, like it's a whole thing. Nothing to rely on, bring your own stuff, but it's nice. So hospitality. And there's two of those again. Will we have two hospitality tents?
No, so it is one big hospitality tent in the middle,
Okay.
which is what it was last year as well. I think it was double sided, but one big tent in the middle.
Okay. Do you still need volunteers for World Toughest?
Always, yes.
Always need volunteers.
Volunteers huge for the event, especially the overnight shift. Goes a long way to help us monitor the obstacles, make the event great. I think everyone that's run World knows that the overnight volunteers are one of the most uplifting parts of the experience. When you've got someone really enthusiastic out there to cheer you on late into the night. So we would love anyone that's interested, passionate about the sport, to come out and join us for it.
What special perk do I earn for being a volunteer?
So free entry.
Other than the warm feelings in my heart, of course.
I mean, you put that out there and everything else is so meager by comparison. But in addition to the warm feeling in your heart, so swag items, shirt, but there's a hat that goes along with it. If you do a double shift, there is free entry to a future event. And I'm sure I'm forgetting things, and I will get dressed down by our dedicated volunteer team for not knowing all of them. But of course, there's food and all of that sort of stuff too, and the camaraderie of working out there with fellow volunteers.
Okay. Some delicious Panera bread meals, I'm guessing.
Of course, can't go to a Tough Mudder event without delicious Panera bread meals.
Are they the official caterer of your team? I've been coming to Tough Mudders for many years, and I feel like Panera has been there along the way for many a year.
They've been through it all with us. So although they are not an official partner, they've been steady. They're like a Commonwealth partner. They've just been at our side for so long.
Well, you say to me, like, hey, Matt, like, you're going to get out there and run, but like, people must say the same thing to you. You were a guy that could be counted on for 75 miles year in, year out in your younger days when you were thin and in shape. So what about now?
I would love to. I get asked all the time.
Right.
I am still bitter that I came up just short of the sweet orange jacket. And so I would love to go take one of those home. However, I now race directed every year. And so not only is there conflict of interest, but there is also a scheduling conflict since I'll be at the race center. But I do legitimately get crazy every year when I get there. Like, the energy is still the same as all the years when I ran it. And my body starts to vibrate wanting to go and partake. Makes me very competitive, makes me really excited. So should I ever break free of this oath I've sworn to make the event happen, I will 100% be out there again.
For the tracking of our athletes, the leaderboard is live.
Mm-hmm.
So I assume same one you've been using for years, right? That one. And then on site, you've got is it usually 3 different places where you can see where they last were?
Yeah, there's usually 3 to 5 spots. I think 5 if you include start and finish. But yeah, we'll have a handful of mats out on the course, and so it'll show
besides me
last known position. What's that, Matt?
A handful of mats besides me. Go ahead. Sorry. You walked right into that one. Go ahead.
Well,
that's not what I was trying to do. I was just trying to establish that you can, it'll be like last seen at, and
yes.
And you can kind of, sometimes they don't work, but for the most part, it's a good way to keep track of your athlete.
Yeah, for sure. So usually either every mile or alternating miles or in between there. It's a balance to strike. We like to do it by distance where we can, but we also place them strategically on course to make sure anywhere someone might be tempted to cut course where we can verify that they didn't take the cut. They went, out on a long split or whatever it might be. So Yeah, it's a little bit of a combo. It's really boring. So we're gonna just keep down this thread with your allergies and the technicalities of timing. But there's active
Well,
timing.
how is that? That's not boring. This is good information for the people that listen to this. Really give a shit about this race,
Well,
Chris.
it's good. So there's active and passive mats. The passive ones don't transmit, but they take splits. So we use those on course to uh, verify if we need to. It helps us to check pacing data and things, but those don't always update the leaderboard. Sometimes they go offline as well. So, but they continue to record splits. So we can go pull data from them during the race or after the race. We can go and retrieve them, and it punches in, so we can call out any anomalies. And the system has a logic to say, like, hey, you know, this person just did something that does not track with their pace over the course of this event. Like, check into it, see what's going on. So yeah, it's a pretty smart system, and we've got a great timing team that lays this stuff out.
Yeah, I really didn't mean to. I really didn't mean to walk you into that Matt conversation, but I'm also a very passive Matt, as people know. So what you're saying is that your timing is it's kind of like the Greco in Ocean's 13. It actually picks up anomalies and knows when things are incorrect.
Yeah, there's a logic in there that it'll flag for us, which is quite helpful.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on, and thanks for all the work that you're doing.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure as always, and I'm sure we'll talk again between now and Worlds. There'll be more to discuss.